Erev Tov, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to B'nai Jeshurun, and I'm Rabbi Felicia Saul. I'm here. My colleague, Rabbi Roli Matalan, should be here shortly. And on behalf of us and Rabbi Rebecca Weintraub, we're really happy to see you and to mark this yearly experience of gathering in memory of our dear Shira Palmer Sherman, who it doesn't pass me by each year to, I was thinking as I was walking over here, like I have a montage of Shira in my mind, in my brain. The Shira of the wizard who would walk into children's services dressed up and capture the hearts of our children. The Shira who one summer wore this leather jacket to shul because it's cold in the sanctuary, even in the summer. And she, just her sense of being at home in the sanctuary. The Shira as a teenager who led Teen Shabbat with such beautiful kavanah, intention. The Shira that I would have the privilege of going out to coffee with on her return from college, with her kind of inquisitive curiosity about thinking what she was exploring in her learning, and particularly around her Jewish life. And of course, the sorrow and heartbreak of having to say goodbye to her. And the way that she touched this community and how brokenhearted we all in some way continue to be with her absence. And it's hard to believe that she was with us less time than she's been not with us. So we gather every year in her memory, and there was intention about creating an evening that was not about children's programming or anything of that playfulness about her, but really about her intellect and her commitment to Judaism and her strong curiosity. And so we always gather with a learning or some kind of lecture or conversation. And I think this year we're waiting with bated breath to hear the conversation between Joanne Palmer and Abe Foxman. I'm going to let Joanne introduce Abe, but I'll introduce Joanne, who is, of course, Shira's mom and Miriam's mom and Andy's wife, and she is the longtime editor of the Teaneck-based Jewish Standard and now the New Jersey Jewish News, and longtime member of the synagogue, and committed to so many important values and sharing the news, and very picky writer and teacher of how things should be. And we're really glad that you're going to be in this conversation this evening. Welcome.
Here, yep. Abe? Okay. And Abe Foxman is the Emeritus Executive Director of the ADL. He is many, many, many other things as well. And it would be boring to list them, and it would take forever. So instead, he's going to describe how he came to be who he is, because his history, his unusual childhood, informs how he sees things now. So, Abe, start from the beginning. Tell us about your life, please.
That's all?
That's all. You were born.
Well, for nothing to do with it. Let me just say first, it's a zchus, it's a privilege. I know about Shira because I know you, and so I could only imagine. So to be asked, to be here in her memory is an honor and a zchus. And thank you for asking. And
thank you, Abe.
Okay, so. To answer your question honestly would really be arrogant. People in a very, very nice way would say to me, well, you survived so you can do this. God, no, I don't know why I survived. Only God knows, and if he or she were around, but I don't know. I survived. I see it as a miracle. I see it as the coming together of good, not evil. I survived the evil because of good, because of faith. I asked my father when I was old enough to begin to try to understand what I had survived. And so in college and high school, especially in college, I did an undergraduate history honors program on the Vilna Ghetto. And when it was all finished, at the various stages, though, I would come to my father and say to him, "Why are you raising me Jewish? Why am I going to yeshiva?" And in his very, very wise and gentle way, he said to me, because it was man's doing and not God's doing. God created man with a choice. He created it with good and evil. And you had lived through both. You lived through the evil, and you survived because of the good, because there was this woman, Bronislava Korpi, who was a nanny to my parents as they fled from Warsaw to Baranovich, where I was born, to Vilna, where the Germans caught up with them, and they had jobs, hired a nanny to take care of me. And when the Nazis conquered Vilna and issued an order for Jews to go to the ghetto, I guess they sat around a table and made the most horrific yet most wonderful decision ever. Well, I guess at that time it wasn't that difficult. My nanny basically said, this is going to take 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. You go to the ghetto, I'll take care of him, and you'll come back. The 4 weeks became 4 years. Because I guess in a way, I don't know what decision they would have made if they understood then what lay ahead and that they may not come back. I don't know what they would have done. But thankfully, they made that decision. I remember when the movie Life is Beautiful came out, and people said, well, it's a comedy. And I said, no, this is a story about a father in a concentration camp protecting his son from the evils by the best way. And I said, you think that's crazy? My parents gave me away to save me. So, all right. So I don't know why I survived. But having survived, I had choices to make as well. And they never really were so A, B, C, D. I grew up in the Sputnik era. Some of you know what the Sputnik era was. I was all about Aliyah. America needed engineers. Israel needed engineers. I went to City College to be a chemical engineer. After 2 years, not my thing. So what do? You go into political science, history. I wound up writing a history honors paper on Vilna. And then what do? I went to law school. And during law school, I read a couple of books written by two guys called Arnold Foster and Benjamin Epstein. And everything is beshert. Life is beshert. The Anti-Defamation League had a staff member who wrote a pamphlet in defense of Pope Pius. Remember, defense of Pope Pius. And somebody reached out to my father, Oliver Shellam, and said, could you translate articles in the Yiddish and Hebrew press attacking the ADL on this issue? And my father said, no, but maybe my son would. And so for about a year, at $15 an article, I was translating attacks on the ADL in Hebrew and in Yiddish. And it was all finished, and I was in law school. I went to this gentleman who's being attacked, Dr. Lechten, and I said, you think there's a job available in the ADL? And he said, not through me. He says, I'm not the best now. But yeah, there was. And there were 3 jobs available. I was my senior in law school. There was a job in fact-finding, discrimination, and law. I interviewed for all 3. They offered me all 3. I said, I'll take law. And I started as an assistant to director of the law department of the ADL in 1965. The rest, again, was more of a shared. So I guess in a movie you'll make a nice story. But things are shared, and sometimes they happen. And I used to ask Elie Wiesel of Shira. People said thank you. Somebody today said thank you for what? What do I say? What do I answer? I feel I don't deserve thank you. I am the luckiest man in the world. I spent my adult lifetime fighting the hatred, the anti-Semitism that almost destroyed me, and embracing the good in the world. Wow, you have to say thank you for this? And he says, just say, you're welcome, I hope you will support me. So again, I've been very, very lucky. And Joanne, to say I survived so I can do this is really the height of arrogance. So I don't know, I'll never know, but I was very lucky that I survived, and then that Joe Lichten wrote this piece that maybe that's what it was all about.
But you're leaving out parts of your story that I think are worth telling.
Okay.
Okay, because they matter.
Okay. My parents went to the ghetto. My mother escaped the ghetto. My mother looked Aryan, spoke good Polish without an accent. My father stayed in the ghetto for a while. My mother escaped, got false papers, knew where we were, where my nanny and I was. And for the next 3-4 years, she smuggled, she stole to take care of us. I grew up knowing she was my aunt. My nanny was my mother was my aunt. I was baptized, I was circumcised, which was a problem. Something I learned many years later, 90% of hidden children are girls because it was a lot more dangerous. And some of the boys that were hidden as girls. Because her problem with me was I couldn't go out and play. Because there was a profession. If you found a Jew, you get a bounty. But she also gets a bullet in her head. So it was dangerous. My father eventually went from one camp to another camp, eventually into the forest, liberated in the forest. When the war was over, he came back to Vilna looking for me. They found each other. We were reunited. My father then did some traveling and found out and realized that both families were perished. And came back and said to my nanny, we'll be a family of 4. Wherever we go, Palestina or America, you go. And she said, no. I saved him, he belongs to me in the Catholic Church. We lived together. There was no housing, so we lived together. She then went to the Soviets and said my father collaborated, and that's why he survived. They arrested him, interrogated him, let him go. Then he became a commissar manager of a factory. She went to the Soviets, said he steals, arrested him again. Then she stole, brought stuff, and the Soviets said to my parents, you have to litigate this. We don't have time for these family battles, so you have to go to court. They took it to court, and my parents won in court. She had no documents. She said eventually, my parents are lying, they had a child, they lost their child. She had nothing to prove it, neither did they. There were no documents. I was 6. At the end, her lawyer argued I should be asked, and the judge ruled that I was too young to know what's best for me. Had I been asked, somebody else would be sitting here tonight. Maybe I could have been the Cardinal of Warsaw, but not here. So by miracle of all miracles, the judge ruled I belonged to my parents. It was the first Soviet custody, first in Soviet territory custody battle. She appealed, lost 2 appeals. Then we were repatriated to Poland. What does that mean? The Soviets permitted refugees within their empire to go back to whence they came before the war. So if you were in Poland, you can go we were now in Lithuania, we were permitted to go to Poland. She was also a Polish citizen. She went back to Poland. There she had family. I was kidnapped. My parents kidnapped me back. We smuggled out. We realized we have to get out of Poland. We got out of Poland as Turks, displaced Turks. And wound up in a DP camp. We found her, my parents found her after they got to America, and for about 8 years, they sent her money packages that she had to sign for. And in 1958, we got notice from the Polish authorities and the Postal Service saying, don't send any more, she passed away. So I never had closure. I never had the opportunity to say thank you for whatever. She not only saved my life, she saved my parents' lives. Because the chances of a family unit of 3 with an infant to survive were minus 0. The fact that she enabled my parents to fend for themselves in order to come back for me, she saved them as well. I've been on a search for her burial place, unsuccessfully, just to go and say thank you. But so in a certain way, every time I tell the story, I'm saying thank you to Bronislava Korpi. Anyway, it wasn't that simple. You're right.
No, it wasn't. Now tell the story of how you went from being Catholic to being Jewish while always being a person of faith.
When we're children, we never think our parents are smart. Till you grow up later and you realize how smart they really were. My father was so smart. It took me a long time to appreciate it. We lived together. People ask the question, so what was your transition like from being Jewish, being Christian, from being Christian to being Jewish? Well, first of all, in Jewish law, I didn't have to do anything. Once you're Jewish, period, move on. Okay, I don't have to do anything. But there was a transition. And we lived together. And I was raised as a good Catholic who went to church every Sunday, who spit on Jews walking in the streets when they went to work. And, one of the first things that came home after the war is yelling, screaming, and somebody called me a dirty name. They called me Žid, and saying to my nanny, tell him I'm not a Žid, I'm not a Jew. So that period was very delicate, and this is where my father's seichel, wisdom, etc. I used to wear a cross. At a certain point, he said to me, you know what, you don't wear a cross. And he gave me a talit katan. It didn't matter, it was something close to on my body. It brought me closer to God. I was happy. It was part of growing up. I used to say my prayers in Latin. He taught me Shema. I didn't understand the Latin, I didn't understand the Shema, but I knew before I go to sleep, I prayed to Boże. And now that I'm 6, I don't have to kneel. Echt good, First time he took me to synagogue was on Simchas Torah. Now, again, imagine Simchas Torah. This was the first Simchas Torah in Vilna after the liberation. And on the way to synagogue, I passed a church, crossed myself, off we went to shul. Passed a priest, dropped my father's hand, approached the priest as I was taught, kissed his hand, and off we went to shul. In synagogue, in the great synagogue of Vilna, the Jews that survived celebrated, as much as you can celebrate. A Soviet Jewish officer approached my father and asked him in Russian, on Ivray, is he Jewish? My father said yes. And he says he's traveled thousands of kilometers, has not seen a Jewish child at this age. Could he take me and dance with me? So Hastara, and he took me and he danced Hastara. I came home, I told my nanny, I like the Jewish church, they sing and dance. Patch. But, so it was substitute, it wasn't theology, it was part of growing up. And then when we moved into the DP camps in Austria, whatever children there were, it was a totally different environment. And I went from Polish and Russian to Yiddish and Hebrew. And it was more a process of growing up and a deliberate process of understanding the theology, the ideology, the history. And to a large extent, it was comfortable because it was, and with the trust, it wasn't done, it was done smartly.
And it also means that you never had the fear of the Catholic Church or the way many Jews do.
No,
it wasn't foreign.
I've reached out. I spent a disproportionate amount of time in ADL in trying to build understanding. Listen, I'm still looking for my baptismal records somewhere, and there are a lot of baptismal records which will never, every day Jews are passing away who will never know they're Jewish, whose parents handed them over. There were a lot of good Christians, not many, but there were a lot, and who raised them as Christians. And every once in a while, you talk to Rabbi Shudrich in Warsaw, he'll tell you stories every single day that somebody on the deathbed says, guess what? You're Jewish, or you were Jewish, or the children start. But yeah, so I've been trying very hard. Again, they could have done a lot more, but they did, and that too should be recognized. And so yeah, I've had I've met every pope since then. I asked the Pope to bless her memory every time, bless her soul, and which is the only way I can say thank you.
So one more question about your childhood. This one is here, and it's a part of American Jewish history that I don't know how many people know about, the chicken and egg farms in South Jersey. Tell a little about that.
Okay, so my father was a Yiddish journalist. He was a Zionist, which was a problem when you came to America in 1950, because all of Yiddish life was Bundist. And if you weren't a Bundist, forget it. To make it worse, he was also a revisionist. He edited a newspaper in Warsaw called Bloy Weiss, which was the Jabotinsky paper in the 30s. Anyway, so they had a rough time. They had a rough time adjusting. Highest brought us. We had some relatives that signed for us, 91st and Western Avenue, Dykeman family. They were jewelers on 47. Dykeman used to be Fuchsman. Foxman used to be FuckSman before we changed it.
Good thinking.
So, just an aside, I appeared before Judge Peter Schmuck. When we got our citizenship, I appeared, these people said, you go and change your name. And Judge Peter Schmuck would volunteer to sit on name changes. And he would refuse to change names. And I'll never forget, very nervous, I appeared before the judge, and I said, Your Honor, I'd like to change my name from Fuchsman to Foxman. And when I become a famous judge like you, I'll change my name back to Fuchsman. He says, petition granted, next. I told the story to Justice Scalia a couple of years later, and he says to me, okay, now time to change your name back. So it was a question of making a living. And there was a Jewish Agriculture Society in New York. They gave loans to Jewish farmers, or to Jews who wanted to be farmers. And so we wound up between Lakewood and Toms River, which then was Yehupitzville, and today is
Still
Bnei
is.
Brak. Lakewood is like Bnei Brak, but then I used to go to Lakewood Hebrew Day School. The Atlantic City, New York bus at 8:05 used to stop at our house on 9-4 highway, pick me up to go to Lakewood Hebrew Day School, and on the way back, they always figured out a ride back, but it was, so we grew up as chicken farmers, not for long. We couldn't make a living there either. My father had to go to New York to work, come home for Shabbos. My mother and I were the farmers, but it was a nice part of Americana, Jewish Americana.
I remember you said that you learned to vaccinate chickens?
Yeah, well, I
A
used to
useful
make
skill.
some money because you couldn't do it by selling eggs. Now you could. Now you can make a killing. So we would go out, young kids would go out at night for, I don't know, $5 a night, whatever, vaccinate chickens.
Which most people do not have on the resumes when they are head of the ADL, at a guess. Okay, so then you spent 50 years at the ADL.
Yeah.
Very long time.
No. Time is relative.
Did you have the feeling when you were there that things were getting better? That we were moving, that the moral arc of the universe was bending properly?
The answer is yes and no. And I guess it lead me to, we've talked before. After October 7th, one of the most frequently asked questions that people would ask is, were you surprised? Were you surprised at the anti-Semitism? And so the answer is no. But to answer you more specifically, sure, we saw progress, absolute progress. We broke all kinds of barriers, all kinds of ceilings. Before I got here, but yeah, this is a racist country. It's a country of original sin is racism, and part of that applied to us. And anti-Semitism was always deep. It was always there. And so when October 7th happened, those of us who spent a lifetime dealing with it, fighting with it, trying to ameliorate it, etc., were not surprised. We were shocked, which I'll get to, but not surprised, because we knew that it was there. We knew that we cannot eradicate it, eliminate it. Why? Because if you study history and you study what it's, we came to the realization it's a disease without a vaccine, without an antidote. It's a yesh, it's a presence. It will always be there for a lot of reasons. I guess if it was one reason, we probably would have been able to find the antidote. But anti-Semitism served a lot of masters. It metastasized. It served the right and the left. The rich, Mark Twain went to Europe in 1890, wrote an essay about the Jews. And he said wherever he went, he found anti-Semites. Rich, poor, smart, stupid, religious, atheists, they're all anti-Semitic. He came up with an answer. He may not be wrong. May not be. But again, he said it's jealousy. Jealousy of Jewish success. That even Jews are being persecuted and they still succeed, they still overcome, and they only care about themselves, which is, he wrote, there's 2 paragraphs in that essay where he says, there's this guy Herzl floating around the world. He wants to get the Jews in one place. Can you imagine all the smart Jews in one place? Okay. So some people say he's an anti-Semite. He's not an anti-Semite. He became one of the most philo-Semites of his age. Professor Sarna Brandeis is writing a book about Mark Twain and the Jews, which is fascinating. But it was always there. So what did we have the ability to do is utilize the best in America to as you know, I've said it many, many times to you, to make sure that if the disease is here, we can put a cover on it, keep it in the sewers so it doesn't infect and affect. And we did a pretty good job. We did a pretty good job. We used all the elements that were out there. In the beginning, it was memory of the Holocaust. It was coalitions. It was threat of using the law. It was legislation. And it was the media. And the most important element in all these years was the truth. The truth, the truth. What is anti-Semitism? What is racism? It's the big lie. It's the big lie. And we use the truth to fight the big lie. And it worked for us. We broke down quotas. Listen, there were places you couldn't buy land because they were entitled deeds. God knows how far it went. But if you look at all levels of society while not eliminating, and I remember when the Biden administration was working on its initiative on anti-Semitism, so I got called into the White House to give some seichel advice, and I said to the people working on it, tell me, what's your purpose? And they said to eradicate anti-Semitism. I said, go home. Don't waste your time. No, it is a historic document. Because for the first time in the history, a government says to its people, anti-Semitism is our responsibility. Now, you can like or not like what they did with it, how they did with it, but it is historic because we used to knock on the door, please, please, please say something, stand up, act against it. And now the government comes up with a document which says, fighting anti-Semitism is our responsibility. Okay, so it was, but they thought in their minds that they could eradicate it. So when October 7th happened, those of us working in the field weren't surprised because we knew it was there. That all of a sudden, the elements surrounding, the elements of containment that we used disappeared or fell apart. Taboos, civility, the truth. There was all of a sudden, it's about 10 years. It's what I call Trumpism. He didn't even realize that he was doing it. Some people say he's an anti-Semite. He doesn't know what it means. Okay, Monteker, Donnersticknish, it doesn't really matter. But no, it's once you destroy civility, and once you destroy the truth, you undermine the basis of the elements of containment in a decent society where you can fight anti-Semitism, bigotry, and racism. And this. If there is one thing that is more responsible than any, again, if you agree with me that it's there, yeah, it's a haya, yes, v'yiyeh, it's always here. Therefore, if this provides it with a superhighway that's unbelievable. Again, we used to, how do we deal? How do you answer the big lie with the big truth? Right? But what if the lie comes in a tsunami? How do you deal with it at that level? So, a long way to answer your question is, those of us in the field understood that that it's there and it can at any moment explode. Shocking. What was shocking? So even knowing that it's there and knowing that it's deep and knowing that it's serious, two things were shocking. One is the intensity of the hate. In a civilized society, don't forget, we're not, Germany was also a civilized society. But, this is America. In America, the level of hate, the anger, and that's, again, I go back, maybe Mark Twain was right. which is serious. Because if the problem is our success, then what's the antidote? Tell your kids not to be number one and number two? And how do you guarantee that if they're number two and number three, they're going to do away with anti-Semitism? So this the level of hatred. And the other thing is, I guess, in a certain way, painful to a lot of Jews, and that is the absence of the good people. Now, all my life, I've tried to abide and live by Hillel. That's me, Mani. If I'm not for myself, who will be? I was always number one, but it was always number two. But if I'm only for myself, what am I? But we didn't do it because we expected payback. We did it because we were taught tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. That's part of who we are. Justice. Justice, that's, And we did it because, not only for altruism, because we understood if you raise the level of tolerance, respect, civility for other groups, it will impact on us. And one example that always comes to my mind is in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And Jews said, Mashmita lehar Sinai, what does that have to do with us? Why, what do you want from us? Good, let it be civil rights. What is nothing? I got news for you. It has a lot to do with them. And they had to learn later. And it's almost a silly example, but it's a very real example. Florida was Judenrein. Judenrein. Why? Because not only can't Jews buy, but they couldn't even stay overnight to find out if they want to buy. And we, Palm Beach, Boca. So in 1965, the Anti-Defamation League sent, after the Civil Rights Act passed, sent in reservations to the breakers. 6 Jewish name reservations, 6 non-Jewish names. You got Cohen, O'Connor, okay? Same dates. Within a week, got back in the mail, yes for 6 non-Jews, no for the Jews were booked, were occupied, sorry. We got on the phone and we said, hello, fellas, we're going to go to court. Because under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you cannot discriminate in interstate commerce. And letters are interstate commerce, and we have proof that you were discriminating against Jews in public accommodations. So again, we did it civil rights for them, for them, did it for us too. Within 2 weeks, the Boca all of a sudden had room for Jews. The breakers. Okay? I don't know if I'm getting a chance to say very many good things about Donald Trump, so let me throw something good in here. Many years later, tried to get the breakers in the Boca to have kosher catering. No. It's the season, it's difficult, all kinds of bubba-mices. I went to Donald, and I said, Donald, we have a problem, we can't get kosher catering into the... If you go kosher in Mar-a-Lago, they will change in 2 days. He says, you got it. And in 2 days, the breakers permitted kosher catering because it was a buck. Here was the money. But there still is a hurt. There still is a shock. And again, I understand. We didn't do it. We didn't stand up on all these issues because they're going to come back and stand up for us. But the absence, you can't count on the fingers of your hand 10 non-Jewish organizations who are standing and marching to bring them home. Forget about anything, forget about the war, forget about Gaza, bring them home. Hostages, hostages, hostages. Human beings, children. Where are they? You can't, there isn't a million of non-Jewish organizations that have gone to the street, and that's shocking. It's shocking. How we deal with it, because I'm an optimist in the days to come. We're going to have to deal with it. But that to me is, look, the NAACP, it gets worse. You don't want to stand for the hostages? Fine. You don't have an international agenda. Why do you go out with a resolution to cut arms to Israel? Hello? The NAACP has no international agenda. So not only can't you embrace, but yeah, there's a lot to digest, and we're not going to throw the get. We're not going to throw the divorce, but we need to take a cheshbon hanefesh. We need to, and the time will come. I believe the time will come, and things will get better. They'll get better. They may not be the same like they were, but they'll get better. We're going to have to sit down and decide first by ourselves. So what does it mean? Again, tzedek will always say to us, some of you say it's tikkun olam. I've never been a chassid of tikkun olam, but that's tikkun atzmi, and then comes tikkun olam. But that's a shock. That really is a shock, because we thought that America was unique, and that the American Jewish community and its relationship with the greater community on issues, social issues, were so meaningful that we will not stand alone. And we stood alone. We stood alone. And that's painful.
Why? 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 Why did that happen?
You gotta ask that. Before I came here, one of my colleagues in Tucson, he's got a program tonight with African Americans, and she's asking me. I said, "Don't ask me. Ask them why." I don't have the answer to why. They have to answer the why. Maybe Mark Twain was right. I don't. There's a jealousy. There is a psychosis. You have to ask yourself, why does Farrakhan have this following? He's a bigot of all bigots. And in the 40 years that he was out there, that I was out there, to get African American leaders to condemn him was. I remember once I went to Chicago, met with the Chicago Defender, and they finally said, "Well, why don't you, me?" And I said, "You know what? If you can convince me that if you hit on the Jews and you whatever, it will give you more jobs, more safety, more education. I'll go back to the Jews and say, listen, for the next 6 months, let Farrakhan yell, look, they're getting this. I said, you're getting nothing for it. Nothing for it, so why? And all they wanted me is to meet with Farrakhan, and I said, no. But I could not get decent African Americans to publicly condemn the anti-Semitism. I would listen to a tape of a rally, and I didn't have to hear. When the decibel of applause went up, he was talking about, not about whites, but about Jews. Why? I believe he sold this notion that we took away, that they are the victims, and we, the Jews in America, stole their victimhood. That everything that we have achieved belongs to them. And that's what you see in the Yay, in the Kenyan, whatever, the basketball. It's this mentality. It's even with Michael Jackson, with the Jew me, sue me, okay? It's this, the lawyers were Jews, their agents were, they did it for them, and yet there was this jealousy. I don't know. That's a question we're going to have, but you know what? In a certain way, we're united now because of this experience, but in a certain way, we're still far from united. So when it quiets down, I think we have to come up with a strategy to say to them, we're not going to go away from you, but explain to us. Explain to us. Why were you silent on human issues? hostages are human beings, men, women, and children, gut and neshama show, they're innocent. Why did not that evoke this humanity response to stand with us? I don't know.
Well, there certainly seems to be massive amounts of anti-Semitism coming from all directions, right? I mean, the sewer covers that you talked about so often, and you used to say that anti-Semitism, that it was because the sewer covers had been lifted. You said it would slime under there always, but about 10 years ago, those covers were lifted. And you know, that was a very specific historic time. It was also exactly when you left the ADL. And those things were not connected, clearly. But
That would be outrageous.
that would be totally outrageous. And you know, I keep thinking that the first time I met you was your very last day at the ADL. I went to your office. It was a huge honor, for one thing, but it was also the feeling that you are actually standing at the end of one era and the beginning of another is an extremely unusual one. But it seems that that was at the same time, and as we said coincidentally, a change in anti-Semitism. And those sewer covers were lifted.
You know, I'm not sure we recognized it as such
At the time, no.
at the time.
You started talking about it about 2 years later, I think it was.
Well, I wrote my book, Never Again, ? Everybody forgets about the question mark. 20 years ago. Nobody paid attention. We were, you know, nobody listened. And I'm saying Jews didn't listen. I'm going through my papers now. I'm giving my papers to the National Library in Israel, so I'm going through. And I am surprising myself how out there it was for years. Not only we, the ADL and the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, but that the reports were out there. We issued them all the time. And people, in fact, said, in Gornish, they're doing it, they're looking for swastikas in bathrooms, okay? And I guess we lived in that bubble because we had created that bubble. So, you know, if you can get in it anywheres and you can live anywheres and, you know, and you can put your names on universities and hospitals, okay? So I don't think we realized at all that things were changing. Look, Columbia, 20 years ago, I went to see Lee Bollinger, president of Columbia. Why? Because there was discrimination in the classrooms, harassment of Jewish and Israeli students 20 years ago. 50 years ago, there were student Zionist organizations on campus to fight Arab propaganda and Arab money invested. There was a network of Jewish student press. You know, I found that, my God, 50 colleges in the 70s had Jewish student newspapers, had Israeli students. So it was out there. It was out there. But we took it seriously in the 70s, fought it seriously. There was an American Association for Professors for Peace in the Middle East. And then, like, all of a sudden, it all disappeared. There was the Student Zionist organization. And we took it seriously. Then all of a sudden, maybe because we made it, or everything became sort of normal, we just let it go. So today, you know, to be shocked at what's going on, it was the same time where Holocaust denial ads appeared in 40 campuses in the United States under the banner of freedom of speech, that the Holocaust didn't happen.
When was that?
What?
When?
In the 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not complaining, but we weren't taken seriously. We still did our job, even though people said, they took for granted what was happening and achieved, didn't see what was out there. So the transition, I guess, 10 years ago, and it wasn't just the ADL, a committee, and Congress almost disappeared, but it was a new generation. It was not because the times have changed. After 50 years, I said, hello, you know what, time for somebody else to do it. Somebody asked an interesting question. If I knew then with certainty what was happening now, would I have retired? And my answer is probably no. Probably not because of the arrogance, but because it was serious enough. We needed more experience than less experience. But no, but I don't think we saw it. I think some of us saw it, but even that, no, not because all of a sudden it happened. Civility and truth and this came together as a force, and you could not foresee. Listen, I wrote a book, Viral Hate, 15 years ago. So I did worry about it. And again, people said, hey, what are you worried about? I went to Palo Alto. I used to go to Palo Alto twice a year to visit with the Chachamim, and they were geniuses. And I was stupid because they said to me, algorithms. And I said, ooh, algorithms. I didn't know what the hell it meant. Didn't matter. They made it sound like it was magic. And we know algorithms is they. Algorithms don't happen from the sky. Rani Shalom doesn't say algorithms. They push the algorithms. But we didn't also foresee such a dysfunctional Congress, okay, where nobody's dealing with the issue. Nobody's dealing with the issue. So we didn't foresee this grow that big because we also believed them. We didn't understand a lot. We believed them. Now you look at the ADL or the committee, they have experts into all of this. But at that time, but it also coincided with the political extremism. And that is, as I say, truth. The most serious thing in all of this is the loss of truth. Civility is everything else in society. How we talk to each other, have respect of each other, that's gone. So yeah, I don't think any of us foresaw 10 years ago that these three elements would come together to such a point that it would so hurt us and hit us.
So I just want to make clear, you don't mean civility and truth, you mean incivility and the lack of truth.
The lack of civility.
The lack of civility, the lack of truth, right?
Right. And we lost truth, yeah.
So I just have one more question that's more general, but because it's not specifically about anti-Semitism only. So I understand that we can't always compare everything to the Nazis. Godwin's law, it doesn't end well. But even Godwin has changed his mind about that. We can talk about the Nazis now. Certainly, we are not now in Germany in 1945 or anywhere near it. Are we at all like Germany in the 1930s? Okay, so
yes and no. That's an easy answer, but I'll be more specific. Elie Wiesel once said to me that Holocaust trivialization is more dangerous than Holocaust denial. And so we have been very, very sensitive to Holocaust trivialization because it's become part of our pop culture. Soup Nazi, every policeman is Gestapo, everything you don't like is Nazi. So it's been abused. And abused by people who don't understand what Nazism is, who Hitler was. It's absolute ignorance based on ignorance, using shock. So for example, I'm very uncomfortable with Jews wearing yellow stars. And Because if you understand what the yellow star was about, why would a Jew wear a yellow star? And yet Jews are starting to wear yellow stars in Israel and here. And I said, what? You know. But so there's a loss of understanding. Having said that, no. We see elements. And so here I will confess to, it's not. It could be, it's not. But there is something that is very, very troubling. Intellectually, Joanne, I always thought I understood how Hitler came to power. I read, yes, but it was intellectual. It wasn't real. Now, and it's not Hitler, and it's not Nazism. It has elements of the 30s, yes. I understand. For the first time, I understand how Hitler came to power. How it worked. How good people turned silent and then bad people. That's very scary to understand, you know, on your flesh and blood, how it happened. Because in all the books, it misses it. And that is very scary for us because we see good people, some of them that we even know, at best just turn silent. They don't necessarily join, at worst become part of it. And that's a terrible similarity. Now, the purpose is not the same, although it has elements. It has elements which are scary. But no, I think we need to be conscious. I think we need to be sensitive. But I think we have to also be very, very sensitive with using the words, because they can lose meaning very, very clearly. So, no, it's not Hitler, but I think for the first time, many of us begin to understand how it happened and how it could happen. And if we understand how it could happen, then we better hurry up in terms of dealing with it. We don't have the luxury. We're talking about 2 years, okay? We certainly don't have luxury of 4 years. We have maybe 2 years, and we better realize, what's ahead. And I don't see it. I see an opposition frozen, traumatized, and I hope I don't upset anybody. But Sanders and AOC traveling the country is not the answer to stop this. Sorry. You can believe them and love them. It's the opposite. It only says, this is what you want America to be. It's crazy. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, but it's where's the seichel at this moment? So I worry more about the lack of serious, thoughtful, meaningful opposition, because that's what we have. And if we don't come up with it, and we don't use seichel, and we don't understand what we're dealing with, and again, forgive me, Saunders and AOC says you don't understand what's going on. Now, there's something you're not asking, but it puts us in a very, very difficult position, the Jews. It's very uncomfortable. It's more uncomfortable than I thought it would be. And I worry about the future because I'm an optimist and I believe that these days will be over. We're in a devil's dilemma. Because things were happening to us that has nothing to do with Trump or Biden. It was happening to what we talked about. the lack of civility, the lack of, and probably the most single. People would ask me all these years, what's the difference between anti-Semitism in the U.S. and anti-Semitism in Europe? And my answer would be, in Europe they have laws against anti-Semitism, but they don't enforce them. In America, we don't have laws, but we have a consensus of consequences. That means the Constitution permits you to be an anti-Semite, Gesundheit, but if you do certain things based on your beliefs, there are consequences. And it was the consequences that people understood they would pay. So you can be in politics and not for long. You're not going to make it. You can be in business, but you're not going to make it. That suddenly changed, and all of a sudden, that patina of consequences was gone. And so there was this patina that protected us, that there were consequences to being an anti-Semite. And we lost it. So there were codes. Look at the campuses. Look at the campuses. Forget about history, okay? They have codes. They know there are codes. There's a difference between saying, I hate the Jews, and saying, burn the Jews. There's a difference between waving a Palestinian flag and stopping Jews from going to class or going to service. There's a difference. It's clear. Codes. The codes are there. You don't have to create them for Jews. And, I don't have to tell you, if somebody on campus, a student, yelled at a rally the N-word, there would be consequences, and there should be. But if you yell at the Jews or burn the Jews, there are no consequences. And then we come into this very uncomfortable situation. And Trump comes to our defense. And for a moment, you have to stop worrying about Trump. We're going to have to worry about Trump later. But for the moment, he's doing what somebody else didn't do. He's putting back consequences to anti-Semitism in this country. And we're not comfortable because we'd rather have Biden do it, but Biden ain't around. And Biden was more concerned with Michigan, God bless him. Okay, that's part of democracy. But we're in a very unhappy situation because we're being used.
Yes.
Because anti-Semitism, he's using anti-Semitism on his agenda, on wokeism, etc. But you know what? He's sending a message on anti-Semitism. Columbia's waking up, and all of a sudden all the other 50 universities are taking a look at, hey, what they didn't do. Immigration, you got to remember, we need to figure something out. 75% of the American people are against immigration. By the way, they always were. Hello. We waited 4 years in Austria in the DP camp to come here, okay, because there were quotas, and we were on the bad quotas. So he's acting that out, and for us, hey, it looks like it's good. So he's using us here too. So I'm saying for the moment, it's not about Trump, it's about us, and see whether it serves for the moment us well. And if it does, Jews have to learn to do a couple of things. We have to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to be able to say, thank you, Mr. President, and no thank you, Mr. President. And we have a problem with that. Because he's doing stuff for Israel, which is good for the moment. I don't know later, but for the moment. Okay? So we need to be able to say, thank you for what you're doing, like we used to say, thank you for Jerusalem, but no thank you in immigration. But somehow Jews weren't able to do both. They felt they have to say thank you and then garnished. Now Bibi's in a more difficult position. Bibi's, again, you got to remember, you can like Bibi, hate Bibi, be my guest. Always remember, remember now, Hamas went to war against Israelis and left-wing Israelis. Not against Bibi, okay? They killed Israelis, not right-wing Israelis. They don't give a shit, They were Jews, they were Zionists, they were Israelis. So we have to be careful not to make him the boogeyman. We have to remember that when it's not defending Bibi, it's defending Israel. And we get lost about defending Israel because we don't like Bibi. And we don't have that luxury for the moment. But we're playing, it's a very difficult situation. It's not comfortable. What I worry about the future is Trump and Trumpism, God willing, will be gone. But we are going to wind up as being the only tribe who is hesitant about defending democracy because of Israel. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. But the end result, that means the rest of America, center, left, is going to see, look at the Jews. And the right ain't going to be there for a while, God willing. Okay? So we're in a very difficult position now. And I go back to Hillel. For the moment, let's concentrate on part one. Something that bothers me terribly, and I had a little conversation. I wasn't going to say anything, but to say it because after I finished that conversation, the gentleman had the decency to say, wow, I didn't think of that. We are a people of hakaras hatov. We recognize the good. Do you know who saved Israel? Joe Biden. Here's the irony of all ironies. You have a president now who says it wouldn't have happened under him. He's now saying Israel can do whatever it wants. He got the hostages back, part of him, whatever. Yechi, Hamelach, HaChadash, wonderful. Here's an irony. Biden saved Israel. Israel exists today because sitting in the White House was a guy called Joe Biden, the Zionist. And everything he did, thank God, what he said was Michigan business. But we're not allowed even to say publicly, thank you, Mr. Biden. That's how crazy it is. Because if we say Biden too loud, Trump may get pissed at Bibi and the Jews. But we at least here should know Biden saved Israel. Forget about his going there, which is a historic moment at a war, okay? With all the great presidents, he went. The military, financial aid, immediate. The fleet, our Sixth Fleet, the April 14th attack that Iran carried out against Israel, it was Biden who brought together the Saudis, the Qataris, you name them, the Brits and the French, to stop Iran with Israel. Israel could not have done it alone. And all of a sudden, the existential threat on Israel is gone. Iran was the existential threat, not Hamas, not Hezbollah, not the Houthis, Iran. And it was done by this one person who stood up. And we can't even articulate at this moment a proper thank you. But that was, and now what is. It's a totally different situation. Yeah, and somebody says, but he stopped arms sales. That was garnished. He stopped selling certain arms to satisfy Michigan, which didn't help. It doesn't matter. But at the essence is they saved the state of Israel. And there is no existential threat today. Okay? But again, it makes life difficult because we can't even say it. We have to keep saying, thank you, Mr. President. So it's not going to be comfortable. But I know your last question is going to be, am I still an optimist?
That was exactly my last question, you're right. Because I should say that Abe has always said that he's an optimist.
So it's harder.
Every single time.
It's harder and harder and harder. But again, you have to forgive me, as you know, having survived the Shoah and 1.5 million children perished, I don't have the luxury. As Golda Meir said, Jews don't have the luxury to be pessimists. I don't have the luxury. God, how can I not have a faith in the future of Israel and the Jewish people? So I am an optimist. I've been saying that it will get better, but I think we have to realize it will never be the same. We lived in a certain situation with certain comforts, with certain understandings, with certain access and advocacies and comfort, which our grandchildren are not going to have. They may have to rebuild it. So it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. But at the end of the day, my faith in the future is based on you. Okay, it's not about whether we survive. It's not about them. It's about us. It's not what they do, because what they do for 3,000, they tried to destroy us. So that's not going to change. We know that. The difference is what we do. That's in our hands. And a couple of years ago, somebody invited me to one of these weekends in the White Plantation. I never went to the White Plantation, so I went. The subject was, will Jewish civilization survive the year 2050? Why not? That's an interesting. They did their homework. And the organizers studied the historians of history, Toynbee, Spengler, to see if they can distill the essence of why civilizations failed. And they, to me, gave me the answer of the secret of Jewish survival. And they said that after the Roman Empire fell, no Roman got up there and said, hey, how do I become a Roman? Where can I sign up to be a Roman again? Nobody. After the Greek civilization fell, no Greek came running around saying, I want to be a Roman, I want to be a Roman, I want to be Greek. How do I become a Greek? The Incas, which was this great civilization, now nobody survived to tell you what happened. But with the Jews, after the destruction of the first temple and the Exodus, the Jews got up. How am I going to be a Jew? Maybe we'll write a Talmud, maybe a new Siddur, maybe new prayers for Yerushalayim, etc. We stood up wherever we were, declared ourselves to want to be Jews, rebuilt, held on to our culture, our dreams. After the second destruction of the temple, again, in exile, the Jews got up and affirmed their Jewishness, wanting to continue. And if you will, in our lifetime after the Shoah, that's what I asked my father, why are you teaching me to be a Jew? If we got up after the Shoah to affirm our Jewishness, to raise our children Jewish, to build the Yerushalayim and a Jewish state and Jewish sovereignty and Jewish independence, that's the answer in terms of the future. Now, they're starting to do analysis. How are we doing? So far, we're doing okay. More people come to shul. That's all the statistics, even though Pew gave us a horrific statistics. 1 out of 4 Jews are no longer Jewish, but okay, that's yesterday. I think it's a little better now. What we're seeing is Jews coming back in America, whether it's attendance in synagogue, whether it's greater involvement, whether it's money for Israel, whether it's standing up, things we haven't seen 2 or 3 years ago, we see now. In that, again, I don't know. I worry about the American Jewish Committee poll, which says Jews are hiding their Jewishness. They're Stars of David, they're Kippot. The only ones who don't hide are the tzitzis flyers. It goes around tzitzis, you see them everywhere, but I don't know how many people are taking off their mezuzahs. I don't know. I hope not many. I hope it's few. Because that's the answer. But I do worry, and a question I get asked is what keeps me up at night used to be Iran as an existential threat. It's not. What keeps me up is the relationship between America and Israel in the future. Israel needs America. America needs or doesn't need, but Israel needs America. It's a reality. I think it wakes up, maybe it'll have its own armaments, whatever, it needs America. It could not, even with the arms, it could not have stood up alone against Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, it couldn't. And I worry what will be after this is over, when we're going to need, I don't see bipartisanship in this country. I just don't see it. But we're going to need America to support Israel. We're going to need an American Jewish community. And what I see in Israel, I see an existential threat from within. My wife says to me, cancel your Israel TV subscription. I watch Israeli TV 3 hours a day. It hurts. You want to scream. And I worry about what's happening internally in Israel. That's very scary. Because we now, talking about America and Israel, we, the Jewish community, we need Israel. We need each other for all kinds of things, for chizuk, for all kinds of things. And I just worry about democracy there. I can worry. I'm not a citizen. I don't vote, but it's scary. Tom Friedman, finish. Tom Friedman was a camper of mine in Herzl camp many years ago. Some people say I failed. But we're still, he says, you're my counselor forever. Okay. My madrich forever. So, recently he wrote this piece about the dangers to democracy in Israel and America. And I called him and I said, you missed the boat. He said, what? I said, there's more resistance to the anti-democracy movement in Israel than in America. They're in the streets, they're standing up, they're challenging, they're fighting and yelling, and here we're doing garnished. You're writing columns, okay? So that worries me. But again, I'm an optimist. I think we've overcome much, much, much worse. But to us, these were pages of history. This is our reality. But we'll meet again next year. And Shira, bring us together again so we can share more good news next time. Thank you.
So much.
We want to thank you, Mr. Abe Foxman, for your wisdom, for your candor, and for your humor, and all your Yiddishkeit that I think some people need a translation half the time, but thank you so much for the purposefulness of your life. And to thank you for Joanne for having the conversation. And it is true that Shira will always bring us together, regardless of the year, whatever will be on the outside, we will always come back and make her memory a blessing, which it is. So I'm now going to invite her dad for his always Broadway moment.
Hi, thank you, Abe, so much. So, a fairly well-known fact about Shira, to the people who knew her, was that she had a tremendous passion for the American musical theater. So much so that, when a kid packs to go to Israel, a high school kid packs to go to Israel, right? You have to get this huge pile of stuff and say, okay, this is the essential stuff. This is the if there's room stuff. And for Shira, 2 trips to Israel in high school, on the essential stuff pile, the stuff that had to go no matter what, included tap shoes. So tap shoes. And this was reflected later in life, in high school and in college. And in college, her freshman year, her roommates told me a story about obnoxious guys underneath them were making a lot of noise and irritating her. So Shira put on her tap shoes and she put a song on the stereo and played it. And back room, could you play it? So she put this on her stereo and proceeded to tap the hell out of the floor on the guys underneath. So I invite you to listen to Satchmo and just visualize Shira using tap and this show tune by Kurt Weill and to both give herself pleasure and extract revenge at the same time.
Oh, the shark has pretty
These
deep
snap your fingers
teeth,
too.
and he shows them pearly white. Just a jackknife as like he did, and he keeps it out of sight. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread.
Right. Imagine being underneath.
Fancy gloves, though, when
Or being her
like
roommates
he
watching.
did. So there's not a trace of red. Oh, on the sidewalk, Sunday morning, lies a body oozing life. Someone sneaking round the corner. Is that someone like a knife? Yes, from a tugboat by the river, baby.
Okay, so enough of a vision. Can we kill the music? Thank you. So that was Shira. I see Namit in the back. You had a gesture, right, to describe this? Yeah. Song and dance. And which I didn't find out about till after Shira died, but which I always think about now. So that's Shira, the tap dancer of show tunes. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Abe, for being here and for being who you've been all these years. So.
Thank you once again. Erev Tov to everyone, and may Shira's memory be for a blessing. Bye-bye.